last time we spoke, we were all thinking that it was back in April, so COVID was very fresh. Everything was very fresh. We didn't know what was happening. Everything was shut down. We anticipated the worst, right? And you've been through the 2008 crash, and you were kind of seeing that, what makes sense to be that short sales and owner finance would be coming back because of affordability, people not being able to buy. Yet everything just like flipped completely in the opposite direction. Buyers flew in from everywhere. Prices went through the roof. Inventory went way down. I mean, what do you think was the biggest thing that surprised you from what actually happened versus what you thought would happen?
I think that the government learned from 2008 that you go big or you go home. That the stimulus package that was passed in 2008 was too small, came out of a compromise, and that it didn't have enough of effect, and how quickly they reacted. And so I'm not making a judgment call whether those stimulus packages long term were a good call or a bad call, but certainly they had an impact on the economy. I think also what's different than 2008 is just we're learning how powerful the buying power of the millennial generation has been, and that as they emerge into peak buying power of age 55, they're now hitting 40-ish, mostly in their 30s. Their buying power is increasing. It is the single largest generation ever. And they have been driving the economy steadily upward since 2008. And, since after the crash of 2008, I think that's just going to continue. But I think some of what we thought was going to happen is happening, and that it revolves around distress. The other thing the government did is kind of pushed back distress, which may prove that it will lessen the impact. I think if they hadn't done that, there would have been probably a lot more foreclosures if they had not done foreclosure moratoriums. You could look at all the residual effects, some good, some bad. But overall, it probably will end up reducing the number of foreclosures as people get back to work. They will qualify for loan modifications, workout plans when the forbearances all come due. But there's going to be a large group that won't. And just the amount of distress in the loans right now, and particularly FHA loans, is extremely significant. 12 to 15% of people are 90 days or more behind on their FHA loans. 3 of the top 10 markets for that level of distress are here in Texas. So San Antonio, Houston, and DFW. Government is right now issuing warnings to all the loan servicers to bolster up their loss mitigation departments, to get ready. Starting in September, they're going to get flooded with phone calls. They're going to get flooded with loan modification applications, workout plans, but also short sales and foreclosures. Short sales less so, just because there's so much equity in properties because of what's happened. So there was a crystal ball miss. I don't think we're going to see a rush of short sales, but we're certainly going to see a large number of people who didn't get back to work or aren't making as much, who don't qualify for loan modifications or don't even try to apply, who don't, just communicative borrowers, which is always a certain percentage of that. We are going to see an increase in the number of homes that hit the auction block. There's no question about it. And that level of distress means opportunity for investors. What a weird market we'll be in, where there is such high demand, low inventory, and yet distress. It's almost an oxymoron that could exist, but I think that's what we're going to see. But again, we don't know. Yeah, it's speculation. It's crystal ball. Is that what's going to happen? Certainly the government thinks that's what's going to happen. Certainly the hedge funds think that's what's going to happen, as they're gearing up to start bidding at auctions. They're going to do a massive land grab, again, just like they did in 2008, and they're gearing up for it. So they tend to be smarter than me. So probably, keep an eye on what they're doing and what they're preparing for. But everybody seems to be preparing for an increase in the amount of distress.
So unpacking that a little bit, you said that starting September, we're going to see, loan loan originators or loan servicers are going to start getting hit a lot because that's when forbearance is over,
That's correct.
right? So you don't anticipate forbearance being extended again, anything like that, if the
I mean,
numbers stay
you
high?
know, so forbearance is always something that's up to the lender, right? And the investor behind the loan could always issue, or grant a forbearance. Uh, the government was very encouraging of that and almost forcing that for any kind of government-backed loan, which is why we see a massive amount of delinquency in FHA loans. I think the government's done. We get, at some point, they've got to let things play out. You can't hold these things off forever. The servicers are, the investors really are taking some hits. They're not collecting payments; they're making payments to whoever they borrowed the money from. Same with eviction moratoriums. You've seen those extended somewhat, uh, but not for very long. So, because landlords are taking such a hit with
Yeah.
that, and eventually something's got to give, and you just got to let this play out. So, I think the goal was to just get us past the pandemic to
Mhm.
where people can return to work, and then maybe they can work those things out with their lenders, but you just got to let it play out.
So touching on that point a little bit, I want to know if you have any theories on why it is that so many people are choosing not to go to currently. I've read articles where they're saying, 4 million people just up and quit their jobs in April. Quit their jobs. So they had jobs and they quit. Like in a time where the government, everybody's making a large effort for people to get to. What do you what do you think is causing this level of people not wanting to go back to work or quitting their jobs? Do you have any theories on that?
I think you just have residual effects from government stimulus programs.
Mhm.
And there's always going to be some level of weirdness that occurs in that will eventually just kind of smooth itself out. You know, again, I don't want to make any kind of judgment calls as to whether that was a good idea or a bad idea.
Yeah.
Ultimately, I think they're meeting the goal of bridging a gap,
Right.
preventing a collapse of the economy. You're going to have some people abuse that, take advantage of that. With any government program, you will have a certain level of that. I think probably too, people just adjust and things become more important or less important. So maybe
Mm.
having two incomes into your household just became less important. And whether or not you're going to get, any kind of government assistance or unemployment, there's some level of, we'll just live cheaper. And,
Mm.
but I think it's just so complicated and so, many
Yeah.
factors that
Yeah.
could factor into that. I think that the media likes to play that up. I think politicians like to play that up, um, is to say, oh, people are being lazy or we're encouraging to be lazy. I think that's just a temporary residual effect that will just smooth itself out over time as these programs come to an end. And overall, the programs probably did keep us from collapsing
Yeah.
and entering a depression. Um, Again, I'm not saying it's a good thing or a bad thing. We have a long time to pay for that. We went into significant debt to do that. Was that the right thing to do or wrong thing to do? I don't know. But did it have its intended consequence? Yes. Did it have unintended consequences? Yes. And so I think you just have to take that as a whole and say, you know, are we, in the future, if something like this happens again, are we willing to accept those little residual weirdness? Um, I think that's better than demonizing the people who have chosen not to work,
Yeah.
or to make it some sort of political statement. I think we just have to look at it as a whole and say, man, we probably did stave off of depression and we have some residual effects, but a year from now, nobody will be talking about it. It'll be over and it just won't matter anymore.